Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome on behalf of the Goffstown Conservation Commission. We're having this little special event where we've invited another group in, the Hillsborough County Area Renewable Energy Initiative. So my name is David Nieman. I'm a member of the Conservation Commission. And if I had two hats, I'd switch them right now because I'm also a member of the Hillsborough County Renewable Energy Initiative. Welcome. So let's get on with it. Tell you a little bit about who HAREI is, what we do. So we're a local nonprofit, and we help residents, businesses, nonprofits who are interested in learning more about solar or installing solar or other efficient and sustainable energy practices, although almost everything we do is pretty much with solar systems. And we provide information for people who are interested in doing a project, and some people come to us just to learn more about it. They may go on and pursue some other ways of doing it, but for those who are interested in our do-it-yourself model, then we get on with that. So there's three ways to get to solar power on your home. The first one, which you may have heard of, the lease power purchase agreement, like the Solar City that comes in and says, hey, for no money down, we're going to put panels on your roof. And you just sign this contract and you'll be buying solar power from us at a fixed price, and it's a little bit less maybe than you're paying, but over the long haul, it's not a good deal because you're not getting the full benefit of the power. And some of the contracts, the rate has a fixed amount. It goes up a little bit every year. By the time you get to the end of that contract, you may not be saving much at all. And furthermore, you have other issues that come up. You sell your house, you've got this contract that you're locked into. You have to hope that the new buyer will assume it, or you have to buy the panels out from them. It can get messy. We recommend you stay away from the leasing. It's just not a good deal. Second choice is to get a professional solar installer, and there are some great companies in New Hampshire that are doing solar installations now, and that's a very good way to go. You might get you can get information from us to learn about it. Maybe that'll help you evaluate the proposal that they're putting in front of you. And then the third method is you join our group and you do it yourself, but with a little help from your friends. And you might say, well, my friends don't know anything about putting in solar. But when you join HAREI, you're going to have a bunch of new friends that do. And as the projects, every year the people join, there may be 10 projects, there may be 20 projects, and everybody learns about it together, they work together, they help each other out. And when it gets to the point where it's ready to have the panels put on, we hold a larger event, which is kind of like an Amish barn raising. We call it a solar raising, where a group of 10, 15 people, we all show up at your house. Those panels get up in 2-3 hours. Everybody has a good time. It's like a party atmosphere. And that's what we do. If you go the do-it-yourself route, you can save up to half the cost of a system because you're providing the sweat equity and you're doing all the labor. And you can do everything in between. You may do as much of the work as you feel comfortable doing, but maybe hire a contractor for certain things. The best example is hiring an electrician. You can do your own electrical wiring, but you got to know what you're doing. You have to be someone who's knowledgeable about it and very comfortable with it. So most of our members, 2/3 to 3/4, not an exact number, will hire an electrician, but about 1/3 of us have done it ourselves. Whether that makes sense for you or not, I just put forward a simple question. Do you know enough about a home electrical system that you could install your own sub-panel in your house? If you can answer yes and really mean it, then you can do your own home wiring on a solar power system because it's a sub-panel. Otherwise, we recommend you hire an electrician because it's important to get electricity right. So we're here to, how can we help you? Like I said, we're here to help you learn what you need to do, what you need to know. You can come to any of our solar raising events as they start to get going in the spring. You can see hands-on how it's done on somebody else's house. You can help put a panel in place. You can see how it all fits together. And that's generally what you do, is you go to these events and you learn on somebody else's house so that you can go back home and work on your own project. We also sometimes can help with volume discounts on ordering some of the materials. For years, we had an account with a supplier out from California where we would actually pay for having free shipping and getting a discount. But to be honest, when you have 10, 20 people working on a project every year, that's a lot of eyes out there shopping and looking up parts. And a lot of times a member will come in and say, hey, I just found a place that's having this great sale on panels. It's better than what we've been seeing. So we'll get parts from anywhere. But we do have a couple of companies that we work with that we know are reliable and that we can get good prices from. So how do you do a solar power system? Well, first of all, I recommend that you go to our website, which is HAREI.org, or HAREI.org. Sorry, I'm working on it. I keep wanting to pronounce it HAREI. We really want to pronounce it hooray, just so we can say, hooray for solar. I'm working on it, I swear. So if you go to our website, there's a how-to section, and it's organized in a logical fashion to help walk you through the process. Overall, there's 6 big major steps. And you go to each one of those pages one at a time, and each one will drill down into more details for that step. But the 6 major steps, which we're going to go through here in the next few slides, are evaluating the solar potential at your house. How much can you generate at your home, and what incentives are available to you. And then the second is how to design your system, and then how to apply for all the permits with Eversource, with your local town building permits. And if you're applying for the New Hampshire state rebate, how to do that. The next step will be ordering and installing your solar power system, and then you'll be ready to connect and activate it, get your final building inspection done, get Eversource to activate it, and then the final thing will be getting your incentive rebate and your federal tax credit. And I think a lot of you may be here tonight because of the poster we sent out saying that this is an important year if you're thinking about doing it, because there's a 30% tax credit on the total cost. I mean, everything associated with the project, 30% tax credit on your income tax. And that 30% credit will expire December 31st. It will run for 2 more years at a lower rate and then phases out to 0. So I think the next year it's 26%, then 22%, and then 0. But 30% is a much better number. So the first thing, evaluating your opportunity. You need to know how much power do you use at your house. And that's pretty easy to find out. How much, I'll get more detail in a minute. How much sun do you get at your house? How much power can you expect to produce with your system? The all-important question, what's it going to cost? And equally important, how long will it take to pay for itself, to make it a good investment? Hello, come on in, welcome. Sit anywhere. So that first step, finding out how much power you use. If you're from Goffstown or surrounding communities, you're an Eversource customer. If you log into Eversource, you can create an account with them to monitor your electric account. You may or may not have done that already. But if you haven't, it's free. Just sign up, create an account. One of the things you can do is download your activity for the past 3 years. They'll dump it all down to you in a spreadsheet, and that'll tell you exactly how much power you use every year. And if you can get the full 3 years, that's better, because things change from year to year. When I downloaded mine, the first year I had a daughter who was still living with us. And then the second and the third years, it was amazing how much less electricity we were using after she moved out and got her own place. Once you determine what your current usage is, then you also want to think about, well, will that number change? Could that number change? And one of the things might be, have you ever had a home energy audit, or do you have any sense of what's going on with your appliances and your equipment? And if you have a brand new house, brand new Energy Star appliances, you're probably in pretty good shape. If you've got a nice, efficient new refrigerator in the kitchen, but you took the old one and moved it down to the basement to keep your beer cold, yeah, that old one might be using a lot more juice than you realize. Or we've encountered all sorts of things like inefficient dehumidifiers, a defective well, whatever. If there's something that's wasting a lot of energy, replacing and fixing that, I mean, is a good idea. That's more cost effective than putting a panel on to take its place on the roof. But you also might want to consider whether you might have some additional electrical uses. A big one might be, well, I've never had air conditioning, but I'm adding it now. Or in the future, I'm going to have an electric car because they're starting to get cheaper and more affordable. And what could be more wonderful than charging your car from the sunshine coming down on your house and not having to stop at the gas station anymore? I think that's a dream we all look forward to. And it's coming soon. Another thing you have to consider is, okay, how much sun do I get? The biggest issue is where you can put panels and whether or not there's any shading. And shading is the biggest problem. Some situations, you have a lot of options. You may be able to put panels on the roof of your house. You may be able to build a ground mount if you have an area that's suitable for that. Many times it isn't, especially in a lot of subdivisions. You don't really have that option. You need to go with the roof. Well, are you getting shading on that roof from trees? Are there any trees that you can take down, or is it the neighbor's trees that you really can't mess with? Or maybe you can, depending on how nice your neighbors are. Sometimes the different roofs, there'll be different levels, different layers, and one section may shade another. So the shading analysis is really important to make sure you're getting sunlight on those panels and not being interfered with. And a lot of times it's like, well, there's some trees over there. I don't know if they're far away enough or not. There's solutions to help with that. There's applications that you can download on the smartphones that are really convenient. You hold them up and you look at the picture and you follow the tree line with the camera, and you get to the end and you punch a button and it comes back and tells you, hey, you're good to go, or you got 10% shading, or you got whatever. So these things can be sorted out. Another thing, if you're doing it on a rooftop, you need to think about, do you have enough area on the roof to accommodate all the panels that you're going to need? The standard panel that are used in most residences are 5 foot 6 inches by 3 foot 2 inches per panel. So it's just a simple geometry problem. How many of those can I arrange? There's actually another larger so-called commercial panel, the 72 cell panel, that's a little bit physically bigger, but it produces a bit more power, and sometimes the geometry of that works out better on a particular roof. There's options. There's always options for everything we talk about. And if you're comparing alternative locations, ideally, you also want to think about, not shading is the biggest problem, but then you need to think about which direction are the panels facing in on the relative to the earth on the compass. That's the azimuth, the direction they're facing. Due south is the best, but you don't have to be due south. You can be all the way east and west and still produce a lot of power, and I'll prove that to you in a minute, hopefully. And you can find out, you can look at Google Maps, you can go out with a smartphone compass, you can see how your house is oriented. That's pretty simple to do. The pitch, what angle are the panels laying at? Are they perfectly flat, or are they at an angle? They're nearly always going to be at an angle. In our area, 39 degrees That's the best angle. That's what you shoot for, 38, 39 degrees. But you have quite a bit of range here because angle isn't quite as important as some of the other factors. You know, it actually varies throughout the year. In the wintertime, a steeper angle is better because the sun's low on the horizon, right? In the summer, the sun's higher, a flatter panel's better. So the 38, 39 is kind of a compromise for the whole, averaging over the whole year. And just for reference, if you have a roof that is 9/12 pitch, well, that's 36.9 degrees. That's a great angle. If it's 12/12 pitch, 45 degrees, that's still a great angle, actually. And then you're going to determine how many panels you need, and it's basically just simple arithmetic. How much do I need to generate? I determined earlier how much power I needed, so how much do I need to generate? Divide that, get the number of panels you're going to need. The example here, our slides are a little bit dated because we're showing 30 by 285 watt panels. We're not buying 285 watt panels anymore. That's what we bought 3 years ago because that was the best price point. Today we're buying 310, 320 watt panels because they've gotten cheaper and more efficient at the same time. You gotta love it. And when I mentioned before that perfect is not required, so I know these colors, these are really hard for everybody to see, but the basic idea behind this graph is that on one side you have the tilt. Is it 0 degrees would be perfectly flat, 90 degrees would be mounted on the side of your house on the wall. And on the other axis you have in the dead center 180 degrees, that's due south, and then you can go all the way out to due east or due west. Well, when you look at this graph, there's a tiny little spot in here that's pure white, that's 100%, that's perfect, that's due south at that 39 degrees. But what happens if you can't quite get there? Well, you got these other zones that come out. So let's go off axis by as much as 30 degrees, right? We're at 150. And we're at 45 degrees, so we're off those perfect numbers, but you're still getting 95% of the power production. So it doesn't drop off quite that fast. And some homes, sometimes the home is oriented so that the roofs face due east and due west. That still will work because you come out here all the way at the edge, and if you can get a low enough angle, you look and you'll find, oh man, I can still get 75% of the power. So what would you do in that situation? Well, you'd add a few more panels to get yourself up to the total production. So it's not as ideal, but it works. And we've done a number of projects that were due east and due west. One of the biggest ones I think we've done in terms of number of panels was a home residence where they had a business, a beauty salon with all these big hair dryers running, consuming tons of electricity. We covered the east and side facing roof of that house with panels, and all worked out great. So, how do you arrive at these calculations? We can thank your federal government for providing you with a really, truly awesome tool. There's a website run by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory called the PV Watts for Photovoltaic Watts Calculator. Really, really simple to use. So we went through this exercise before of, previous slides. We figured out how many panels do I need, how much do I need to generate. Well, this helps you find the ideal number of panels. So let's say if you had 30 panels and they were each doing 300 watts output, well, that would come out to a 9 kilowatt system. So it would be 900 that you'd enter in the top box. In this example, it's probably 285 watt panels, and it's doing 8.55. And then there's other entry like module type. That's just standard. You don't have to touch that. Then there's this other entry where it says array type. That's fixed open rack, unless you're doing a tracking system, which we don't usually do. Here's the one that people always ask about, system losses, 14. And that's the default value. They just put 14% system loss is put in there automatically. And they have this little calculator off the side. And you can open up that calculator. You can go through a whole bunch of complex calculations. You know what your answer is going to be? 14 every time. just take the 14. Don't even worry about that. Then you put in the tilt of your panels and, again, the azimuth, which direction they're facing. So you just really only need those three numbers. You put those three numbers in the calculator, you hit the button, and it comes back and it takes that DC voltage, that rating that you put in for all the panels, and it tells you, okay, this is how much AC voltage, how much AC energy you're going to produce for the whole year. This is the number you would compare to your electric bills. So if your electric bill, oops, sorry about that, hit the wrong button. If your electric bill said you were using 10,200 kilowatt hours per year, and you just did this configuration and it's 10,382, you go, yay, I'm right on here. This is looking great. It'll even tell you how much you're generating every month. And you'll see variation in the months because, you know, October this year was bad. October in previous years was good. You know, it depends how much cloudy it is that month. But the amazing thing, that annual figure is so spot on accurate. I've been running for 3 years now, and my actual power produced compared to this model that this calculator predicts, I'm at 101% of the prediction over 3 years. So it's a very, very good tool. One interesting thing we always like to point out, because this usually surprises people, is you look at the monthly numbers, 936 kilowatt hours in January. Look at March, 1,193 kilowatt hours. And then you come down and you look at June, 975, and you go, but June is the longest days of the year, right? There's more sunshine coming down, hitting the panels. How can it be that the production is so much higher in March? Well, it turns out the panels are, first of all, March tends to have less clouds. That's one factor. Maybe a little bit less moisture in the air, but the biggest factor is temperature, because the solar panels are much more effective at low temperatures. The silicon, when it gets hot, it loses a little bit of its efficiency. So you may think that they have it made out in Arizona or Southern California, but our cold temperatures actually give us a bit of an advantage in these winter months. In fact, you look at this prediction in this particular model, it's 936 for January. That's as good as some of those summer months. Surprising. I guarantee you will make less in November, December, but you'll still be making quite a bit of power. And so now we start getting into, well, how much is this going to cost? Well, don't get too locked in on the numbers here. The purpose of the slide is just to demonstrate how you figure out the cost. Everybody's system will be different because it depends on how big your system is, how much power you need to generate, and so on, right? But in this particular example, if the money that you're going to have to spend, you're going to have to buy the parts, the panels, the inverters, the hardware, everything. We put in permits to be complete, but permits are like almost so small we probably could leave them out. About the only little permit you have to get is maybe your building permit, and that's, you know, $50. It's a very small part of the whole expense of this. Unless there's some other special circumstances which could occur, I suppose. And then installation. The installation cost, what'll that be? Well, it depends how much of the work you're doing yourself and how much you contract out. For example, if you're hiring an electrician, that's part of the installation cost. If you maybe hire a roofer to help put the feet on your roof or something like that, that's an additional cost. So then that varies. But just for the sake of discussion and illustration, let's say that in this case, the individual spent $15,000 for all the parts, which isn't, you know, we've had systems that come in at a price like that. It depends on, again, how big a system are you building. All right, that's the upfront cost. Well, you're going to get a good chunk of that back in less than a year. And there's two ways that happens. First, there's a rebate program with the state, the New Hampshire rebate, which currently gives out $1,000 rebates. Now, when everything is great and wonderful, you'll get that back very quickly after you've finished your system, maybe within a couple of weeks. Things don't always work that smoothly in state government. I know this comes as a shock to everybody, but there are the fund that supplies this rebate, sometimes it runs out of money, and then it's a long time before the money gets put back into it. Sometimes people put their application in, and then they get on a waiting list. And so maybe you don't get it back in a couple of weeks. Maybe you don't get it for 6 months. And maybe for the sake of calculations, you want to assume you get nothing at all, because you never know, it could go away. But currently, it pays about $1,000. It used to pay a lot more in the past. I did my system in 2015, and back then the rebate was $3,750. But don't be too envious, because when I go back and run the numbers for if I was building it today with the more efficient panels that are cheaper, there's no difference. You know, the prices have come down enough that it's kind of wiped that out. So you haven't lost out really in that regard. But the really important one is the federal tax credit. Now this is a full credit. This is not a deduction, but this is another form. It's a very simple form. You write in one number actually. The total cost of the whole project, that's all the parts. If you've hired anybody, electrician, anything, that's part of it. If there were 2 trees you had to take down just for this project, that's part of it. If the 2 trees you just took down because you wanted to, that's not part of it. It has to be, you know, part of the actual installation. But every penny of it counts towards the rebate. So for $15,000 up front, in this example, that federal tax credit is $4,500. So now you've reduced their actual cost. What you're actually paying has come down to $9,500 in this example. Looking better. And then the final thing is you consider, okay, so what are my long-term savings with this? Well, what's your term for long-term? We have to define that. I'm picking 25 years for this example. I'm picking 25 years because that's the typical warranty that comes on the solar panel and on the inverters. 25 years from most of the ones that we buy. So that's a good number to pick. They may last a lot longer. They may last 30 years. They may last 35 years. Who knows? They may last 40 years. I won't last 40 years, so I wouldn't use that term myself, but you know. You want to take everything into account, right? So if you're now saving $1,500 a year that you're not sending to Eversource to pay for electricity, well, $1,500 a year for 25 years, that's $37,500. There's also a renewable energy credit. We debated whether to even include it in here because that's a program that, you know, used to pay a lot more and is now down, and that's up. Unfortunately, that's very dependent on political decisions, which didn't go well the last year or two. Used to be a lot more. It used to be like $50 for one of these credits. It's for every megawatt hour of energy that you generate with your system, you can sell into this market. We'll explain this in better detail in a slide coming up. I'm assuming I'm assuming $50 a year in this case, which is a pretty small number. Over 25 years, $1,250. So it brings the total number here up to $29,250. And this number has already had the cost that you really paid subtracted from it, right? So you start with the upfront costs, you subtract the rebate, the tax credit, you subtract your savings over time. So that means over 25 years, that's $29,000 coming into your pocket. If it's 30 years, it's probably going to be more like $45,000. It really adds up. So what are some of the things that determine the design and the cost? Well, the first thing is, finding the right panels. They're pretty much a commodity these days. There's not a whole heck of a lot of difference among them. But we always try to find the panels at a good price, at high enough efficiency and rating, but low enough price. You may see a 340 watt panel out there, but if it costs a whole heck of a lot, it may not be the best deal. You may buy the 320 because it's a better price point. And then you have to convert that DC into AC energy, and there's two different ways to go there. There's, again, more details coming up soon. There's microinverters or the central inverters, and there's a price difference between them. You might want to look at the short-term cost, but you might also want to think of the long-term cost, because short-term costs and long-term costs aren't always the same. Again, we've got a lot of people looking at these things, a lot of people to help you with these decisions. And then there's all the other miscellaneous components, switches, meters, monitors, wiring, hardware, a lot of the stuff that we have here for you to look at, just to get a feel for what it's like. These are all things that, then just to mention, on some of these items, we can probably help with finding the group discounts and the best price. Other things like, wire and hardware and stuff, a lot of that you're going to get locally. Find it the best electrical supplier, or big box store, or Ace Hardware, or whatever you find the best price. So panels and inverters, we like to bring panels to these displays, a full-size panel, but a full-size panel doesn't fit in my car, so I'm sorry, you don't get to see one tonight. But as I said, they're roughly 3 by 5 feet. And I'm going to talk more about microinverters because we have one here. So microinverter attaches underneath the panel. In the picture here, it's the small black device right here. And this is what one looks like. And on one end, the panel just plugs into it. You're putting these things together. When you come up and look at it later, you'll see that the plugs are really distinctive. They're completely different. Impossible to plug it in wrong. Just can't be done. Can't make a mistake.
Are the plugs standard for all panels?
Huh?
Are the plugs standard for all panels? So like
Yeah.
five brand A or brand B,
There,
plugs are still going to work?
there is more than one standard out there. There may be like 3 or 4 commonly used ones, but this has never been a point of confusion because one standard, one plug type dominates the others. And almost everybody uses that. That's the sort of thing that we would spot check. We help anybody who's ordering parts make sure that everything matches. It's not a problem. And then the company that makes the inverter, they also make a special cable, which will look a little different now. This model is several years old. There's a new model that replaces it, but it's all fundamentally the same. And you get the special cable that can only plug in one way. Can't make a mistake on that either. And so you'll have a string of these. You can have up to 16 panels plugging into one of these cables. And you can see that in the diagram here. Are you going to mount your panels on the roof or on the ground? Again, well, you all have decided that by this point, but typically there are a number of different mounting systems out there. We tend overwhelmingly to go with one particular design by a company called Iron Ridge, but not exclusively. We have members using all sorts of other systems as well. In the Iron Ridge system, you have these big aluminum rails. They come in 14 or 17-foot lengths. This is what they look like. I got these channels in here with the hardware. Everything just slips in, twists, snap. It's so simple to put together. They can be cut to length. Obviously, a couple pieces we've cut off. They can be spliced together. We have 2 short pieces here with the little splice. So you can make sure you get the rails exactly the length that you need. And if they're on the roof, we there's like little mounting feet that, here's an example, an older design. This will actually slide up underneath the shingles. You take care to put sealant and stuff so that it's waterproof. But this slides up under your shingles, and then it gets secured by a lag bolt that goes straight through and goes right into the rafter. For this design, it has to go into a rafter. Probably the biggest challenge with these systems is making sure you find the rafters. There's a lot of flexibility in this. If you miss, you got this big plate covering it up, so if you need to make a small adjustment, it's not the end of the world. But we have very creative people in our group, and one of them came up with, his name was Dave Agans, so we call this the Agans Miracle Stud Finder. If you have access in your attic to the rafters underneath the roof, you can go up in your attic and just slide this up over the rafter. It's got two very strong magnets that can be read by a compass up on the roof, and the compass will go right dead center. We have our ways. We have a number of techniques. So that's how you mount those feet and mount the rails. If you're doing a ground mount system, then there's all sorts of things people have built. Carports, gazebos, pavilions, just to put their panels on. But the most common ground mounts are, you just get steel galvanized pipe. You get them from the local electrical supply company. And you dig a hole in the ground and you set the pipe down in with concrete, short ones in the front, tall ones in the back. Another one runs across. Very simple hardware to tighten them down with U-bolts. And once you have those two rails in place, or two bars in place, then these rails just lay down across them. And then you just mount the panels on the rails. It's pretty simple design. We have even done these ground mounts in places where it's pure ledge. Famously, one of our members lives on the edge of a quarry, granite quarry. In that case, he had to drill holes down into the rock, epoxy bolts in, had a special footing made up, and then just bolted the pipes onto that. So those are the two extremes: good soil to work with, and ledge, and anything in between. There's ways to do it. This is just a rough schematic, conceptual schematic of the electrical plan. You're not going to be able to absorb that sitting in the room, and I understand that. The main point of this is that it's pretty simplified and well understood, and we actually take this drawing and we often edit it for members' projects. So you can edit this, you can correct for the number of panels you're going to have, make sure the numbers are right, and then submit that as part of your electrical permit, and submit that in your Eversource application. If you were to go into town hall and pull my files, you go, boy, that drawing looks familiar. So let's start talking about how does it pay? So it pays by using the concept of net metering. We're not talking about battery systems here, because a lot of times people think, oh, I'm going to be completely off the grid, I'm going to have a big bank of batteries. Well, you can do that, but that's very, very expensive. You could spend so much more if you try to use a battery system. The easier way and the simpler way is to get a net metering account with Eversource, and essentially the grid is your battery, is your backup. The way net metering works is, so you have the sun is shining on your panels during the day, they're producing electricity which is flowing into your house. Anything that your house is consuming at the time, you do a load of clothes, turn on the dryer, that's free electricity. It's coming from the sun into your house and you're using it on the spot. But most of the time you're going to be producing more electricity on a bright sunny day than your house is using. And so what happens then is it flows out backwards out into the grid, and electricity always goes to the nearest source it can find to ground, so it'll be going to your nearest neighbor's house and powering their house. But it's going to be metered by your new two-way utility meter, and you're going to get credited for every kilowatt hour that you're pushing into the grid. it's going to be measured, and you will get credited for that kilowatt hour at 14 cents per kilowatt hour. Now it's nighttime, you're not generating electricity, so you're pulling your electricity from the grid, and you're getting charged at the regular rate for consuming electricity, which I have here at 18 cents per kilowatt hour. I have to keep track of when they raise the rates. We might have to modify the graph, the slide. So you do get credited at a slightly lower rate than what you consume. You can compensate for that a little bit by adding a few more panels than maybe what you need, so that you're pushing out a bit more to balance it out. Because that's always the goal, to try to balance it out so you can zero out your electric bill. Actually, you will never zero out your electric bill. You will get it down to $13 and some odd cents, because there's certain taxes and a connection fee that always applies no matter what you're doing. But I got to tell you, it is so wonderful month after month to get a bill. $13.29 this month, $13.40 next month. I should have brought a stack of them. It's just wonderful. I can live with $13. So yeah, you're only paying, in the end, you're only paying for the net energy. What you draw, take away what you send out to the grid. So any difference between that. And these credits that you get, these aren't just for a day or for a month. They carry out throughout the whole year. So in the summer months, or especially March, when you're producing more energy, way more energy than you're consuming, your credit is building up and up and up. You know, so you come into the winter months, like for me, I come into the winter months and I'll have like, you know, maybe 4 megawatt hours of energy credit. And then I get into November, December, now I'm pulling more electricity than I'm generating, so my credit just keeps coming down. The important thing is, in the end, it all evens out to zero. Again, the federal tax credit, I want to emphasize that, that's so important. The New Hampshire rebate, it's 50 cents a watt up to $1,000, or 30% of the total cost. It's $1,000. You're all going to be building systems bigger than the minimum threshold. And then there's the concept of the renewable energy certificates, or renewable energy credits. And the way those work is, when we build our systems, we have some way of measuring how much we're producing. And I mean the total production, not only what we send into the grid, but what we use in our house. And the easy way to do that is just to put a little utility meter between your house and the panels. Or some of the other, there's even simpler ways to do it now. But anyway, you measure it, and every month, at the end of the month, you go and you write down your meter readings, and then you report it to a company that you've signed up with. And what they do is they roll up all these credits, all this production from all the people that sign up with their accounts, and the utilities are required to have X amount of their energy be from renewable sources. And one of the ways they fulfill that requirement is by buying these renewable energy credits. And they're sold at an auction. They bid on them. It's on a quarterly basis. The returns are highly variable, though. When I first started my system up in 2015, it was $50 a rec, and I produced 13 megawatt hours a year, so that was $650 I got in my first year. Now, it's $10 a credit, $5 a credit, partly because the rules have changed, which is unfortunate, but we're hopeful the rules could change the other way again. We'll see what happens in the next couple of years. Always hopeful.
How do you get those exactly? You apply for it, or
You
you actually have to purchase a certificate?
No,
Because you mentioned sold at auction. I was like, who's doing the buying?
so you sign up with a company.
Yeah.
And one many of you use a company called Knollwood Energy. And the state law requires that you sign up and create that account. And you also have to sign up with an auditor who verifies that you're telling the truth. And all it really amounts to is you just send them your meter reading once a month. So I have a little, I'll give you my example on my system. I have a little standard electric meter, like we're all familiar with. Buy them used, they're like 15 to 20 bucks. They're really cheap. And that measures all the energy coming out of my system to the house. So at the end of the month, I just get the meter number. I log into the website they provide. I type in that number. That's it. I'm done. That's all I have to do. Now those then get reported to this company, Knollwood Energy, and they're the ones that they pool together from all of us, because utility isn't buying my piddly little number of one rec. They're buying thousands of these recs all at once, and so they bundle them up, and that bundle goes to auction, and then depending on the price, 3 months later, or you get the check. You always get your check 1 quarter behind the quarterly report. You know what? Even if it gets down to a small amount, $5 to $10, there's that pesky $13 a month that you always have to pay. Well, you can get that canceled out too with the recs. Hopefully, if they won't drop so low that doesn't happen, but at least they're going to offset most of it, if not all of it. Again, this is kind of emphasizing again the whole payoff thing. We sort of looked at this before in a previous slide, but here just to reemphasize, so you got $15,000 your initial outlay. This was for a system producing rated at 8,550 watts based on the number of panels. You got your $4,500 tax rebate, tax credit. You got your $1,000 rebate, your total cost of $9,500. In this case, for this system, slightly higher. It's you're saving $1,868 a year. Again, don't get too tight in on the numbers. Everybody's numbers will be slightly different. And in this case, the whole point of this, introducing this slide again, is just to show you that, well, by saving that much to pay off the amount you actually had to spend, after 5 years, 5.1 years, you'll have paid it off. Now, if you hadn't installed solar, you'd still be spending that money. You'd just be paying your electric bill. Instead, you're paying off your system, so you're not really spending any more money. But after that point, it's money in your pocket every year for the next 20, 30 years. That's the payoff. And those years to pay off will change dramatically depending on the size of your system, how much you're saving, and so on. How much of the work you do yourself versus how much you contract. It's a lot of variation. This is a spreadsheet, and please don't try to read this. This is impossible for you to read it. It's not intended for you to read it in this display. It's merely intended to show you that, hey, we have this spreadsheet template. So if you join and you want to do a project, this is another one of the planning tools that will help you as you're sizing all the parts and pieces. We got a template that you can edit and modify, tell you exactly what things are going to cost. It's ready to be used. Now, before you order equipment, there's some paperwork that you want to do. There's always paperwork and applications. The first and the most important one is to put an application in with Eversource for your interconnection application. And this application and the New Hampshire rebate one, they both have 2 parts. There's a pre-approval form that you submit saying, hey, I'm going to do this. And then they approve it. And then they say, okay, you got a year to complete your project. When you complete your project, you send in the second part saying that, yep, confirming this is what I've done. The pre-approval one with Eversource, it's really pretty simple. Basically, they're just trying to make sure that what you're doing makes sense. For the average size house, you're saying, oh, I'm going to build a system that's rated at, 9 kilowatts. And they have to make sure that, you're doing that and not trying to build a system that's rated at 90 kilowatts, because a system like that would blow your transformer up. The lines on the street couldn't handle it. So they're just making sure that what you're doing is workable and sane and that the equipment can manage it. If you do put in an application in for an extra large system, an atypical one, then this, instead of being a free application, they may charge you $100 to come out and evaluate the lines on the street and evaluate the transformer to see if that would actually work. I think with all the members we've had, we've only had one member that tried to do that and had to have that application. And in that case, it wasn't doable because some of these rural roads. But for the standard home, for the average home, I mean, they've already got lines supplying enough to power your home. And if you're just trying to power your home, it's going to balance out and extremely unlikely you're going to have an issue. These applications, Eversource, they are wonderful. They are very quick and very responsive. You'll get your answer back in just a few days. They're terrific, actually, working with them on doing net metering. The New Hampshire rebate pre-approval application, that's a similar thing. You put down all this information about your system. You have to make sure you give them information that you're not going to be too shaded and all that this is actually going to make sense. And they will pre-approve you for it, but they might put you in a waiting queue if there's currently no money in the pool. And then your local building permits, those vary from town to town. Every town's a little bit different in how they handle it, but basically you need a building permit and an electrical permit. You need a building permit whether you're putting structures on the roof, or you need a building permit whether you're building a ground rack. And you need the electrical permit for obvious reasons. You're doing electrical work. And if you're doing a project in Goffstown, our building department, they're terrific. They're so easy to work with, so helpful. Always good to talk to your building inspector about what it is you want to do beforehand. So, if there's any advice, any heads up they might want to give you, they'll do it. Great people to work with. So all along here, I've been talking about the upfront money and all that is upfront cost of $15,000 or whatever. Well, not everybody has $15,000 sitting in their piggy bank ready to go. So you might want to look into a loan if you need to do that. And there's two ways you could go with that. One is if you have equity in your home, you can get a home equity loan because that's a fairly simple process and will have a reasonable interest rate. I personally am not a fan of home equity loans. I've never had one and just don't like the idea of borrowing money against my house. But this is the one thing where I would, because you're immediately adding value to your house. If you're putting a system on your house that's worth $20,000, your house is now instantly worth $20,000 more, because if somebody wanted to buy it, who wouldn't love the fact that they would have solar panels on it? And there's also a concept of green loans. I don't know how many institutions do this. The one I know for sure is St. Mary's Bank. They have what they call a green loan. I don't know what the current interest rate is. You have to call them. They don't list it on their website. But the nice thing about these green loans is that they're unsecured loans. Nobody's putting a lien on your house, like a home equity would be. There's no collateral at all. They do this because they know if we're loaning you the money to build a solar system, you're going to have the money to make the loan payment because you're not paying the electric bill. You're paying a different bill, but you're still paying every month until it's paid off, and then you're putting the money in your pocket. So when you get to the construction, most of the work can be done do it yourself. Preparing your mounts, whether it's ground mounts or roof connections, mounting the microinverters if you're using them, electrical components, and then finally you get to the solar raising where the members all come out and help you throw the panels on. And then when you're getting ready to finish up your whole project and get it activated, the first thing you do is you have the building and electrical inspection done to approve the work. And you need the inspector to sign off on a form that goes back to Eversource, the final completion one, so they can see that, yeah, this has been signed off by the local building inspector. And then you call up Eversource and say, I need a net meter. And they're very fast. I mean, a lot of people that come out the next day, the next 2 days. I don't really know of anybody who had to wait more than a week. And then now your system is connected, you activate it, you throw the switch, you're generating power. Then you're going to complete the New Hampshire rebate form, the post form. So hopefully you can get $1,000 back soon. You'll register with the rec auditor that we were talking about a few minutes ago to report your generation to get those rec credits. Finally, when tax season rolls around, you'll get the federal tax credit on your income tax application. And then enjoy your solar energy.
Is that your house?
That's not my house, no. Not sure, do you know whose house that is?
Don't know whose house that is.
We've done many houses.
But you can show your house. Right there on the first page there.
Oh, yeah. Gene brought a notebook with all this material to look through that has pictures. I did a ground mount, so that's mine. It's out in the meadow. It's not on top of my house. My house is pretty tall. I looked at that roof and I was too scared to go up there. Plus my roofing was already more than 15 years old, so I didn't want to put panels, that are going to last 25, 30 years on shingles that are already 15 years old. It's not a good match. So that wraps up the presentation. We're here to answer any questions, and we have other members. We've got stuff for you to look at. Phil.